Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. He's talking to today's industry leaders and entrepreneurs about the people side of their business.
Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast, where we feature entrepreneurs and business leaders whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, and for the next 25 minutes, I'll be your host as we explore how to build your business through better hiring. Today on the program, Matt Rosetta is the founder and CEO at North 6 Agency, or N6A. Headquartered in New York City with offices in Toronto and Boulder, Colorado. Founded in 2009, Matt currently has just over 50 members on his team and is doing all kinds of great things to help his customers gain awareness out there in the market. A couple of fun facts. Matt originally founded N6A in his basement in 2009 and has since grown to have an international presence. N6A's culture, and here's really the story for us today, has been lauded as the most rewarding, collaborative, and unique in the agency world by Forbes, by Monster.com, the New York Post, Chief Learning Officer Magazine, Entrepreneur, and others, and was named a finalist for Digiday's Most Innovative Culture Award and a winner of PR Week's Best Places to Work. So all kinds of fun to dig into there. Matt, thank you so much for being with us today.
Adam, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
We're going to focus on the people side of what you do, but before we dive in, give us 30 seconds on N6A and what you're up to.
Sure. Appreciate that, Adam. So we're a full-service PR and social media agency. We're based here in New York City. We also have offices, as you mentioned, in Toronto and Boulder. We work with clients in about 30 different industries, so we're really well diversified. And basically what clients hire us to do, Adam, is help elevate their brand via the mainstream media, trade media, social media platforms, and through content awards and speaking programs.
Very good. And if listeners want to hear more, what's the best way for them to do that?
So our corporate site is n6a.com. And for anyone who's listening and might be interested in a career at N6A as a prospective employee, we have a culture and recruiting website, which could be found at competeandcare.com. That goes over all of our corporate values and some of the cool stuff we do in terms of cultural programs.
So let's start there. I mean, what strikes me about your approach is you are doing so many things right as it relates to finding and hiring the right kind of people. I mean, what we know to be best practices, of course, is to start with employment brand, retail your jobs like products, pitch what is unique to the right kind of audience, and you do that through dedicated career sites and really rich content. You do all of those things, and you really do it at a very, very high level. Talk about the shift for you to a values-based recruiting approach, and tell us about compete and care and embrace the pace. Let's dig right into where I think you really differentiate yourself.
Sure, Adam. So, I mean, look, in our business, we're obviously in a services business. Not that product businesses are exempt from this by any means, but particularly in a services business, it's all about the people. So, as an organization, you really need to make sure you're doing everything you can to attract the right people, retain the right people, and reward the right people. So we do a whole host of things, and it's taken a lot of experimenting and a lot of tests. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. But over the course of 9 years, or now going on 10 years of doing this, we've struck gold with some of our programs and some of our perks and some of our reward structure, and all of them really, we do a lot of cool things, which I know we'll get into from a perks standpoint, but it's really all rooted from our values. We really do believe in an employee first culture. We believe in a culture that is rooted in experimentation. We encourage all of our employees to go out and, play in traffic a little bit, and don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to push the envelope, and just, be really smart about it, where, you're analyzing what worked and what didn't work, and you're learning, frankly, from the things that didn't work in an effort to get better for the future. So, our entire internal culture kind of speaks to that, that mindset.
How far along were you in your history as a company before you decided to build a dedicated employment website?
We built competeandcare.com. That's probably about 3 years old at this point. So we were 6 or 7 years into this.
And what was the driver to do it? What were you seeing that required an investment in your own career site as an asset?
Well, what was happening was at that point we had really built a nice track record in culture and a lot of our rewards programs. What we were finding was that recruits who were coming in to meet with us, they loved it, and they loved a lot of our programs and our perks and our culture. It just there was a lot of stuff, and it was in some cases it was sort of hard for us to just communicate it to them in one sitting. So we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to just sort of organize this and roll it up in one dedicated portal that goes over our values and some of our cultural programs and our competitions and what's important to us, and highlight our top performing employees through the years and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where it was rooted in. We found a good deal of success about 5 or 6 years into our business in differentiating ourselves from a cultural standpoint. But we also found that it was a little bit difficult to communicate it in a well-organized way when the recruits were coming through our doors. So we thought it made sense to just put it all in one place via a website.
Have you found a lift in applicant quality? Just speaking really tactically, I've what we see and what I've experienced myself is, culture sold right means two things. It attracts the right people, but it also keeps the wrong people from applying. So, the result is quality goes up. You get more of the right people walking in the door. Perhaps fewer overall applicants, but a much higher level of quality and intention about working for you. Can you talk to us about that? Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, totally. And I totally agree with that. And that's actually been one of the benefits of the Compete and Care website and just sort of our culture. It is very transparent and it's very authentic. And the good news is that by the time a candidate or a recruit walks through our doors, they kind of already know what we're about because they've read about us, they've heard about us, they understand what's important to us, and the end result sometimes is that the quantity of candidates might be lower, but the quality is higher. So I would take quality over quantity any day of the week, and we'll get anywhere from, I don't know, 90 to 100 resumes, inbound resumes, every week into N6A or into careers at n6a.com. The percentage of qualified resumes is significantly higher than it ever was before, and I think that's because we have a culture that's seen as very authentic and very genuine, and we do get the right kind of candidates, and that's important nowadays.
You guys are next level when it comes to your employee perks program. So I want to talk about Pace Points and spend some time here. What in the world is this program you've built, and how did it come about? And the scale of it is pretty impressive. So to take us through this, what are you doing in terms of rewards internally?
Sure. So first off, what is Pace Points about? Pace Points is a fully customized employee rewards program. It lets our employees choose their perks that matter most to them. We have 6 categories. We have a category for cash. We have a category for quality of life, for experiences, for travel, for food and health, and also for transportation. So employees, and there's about 10 or so tiers within each category, ranging from anywhere from a few $100s in value all the way on up to $50,000 and more. And employees accumulate points, Pace Points, based on certain achievements, individual achievements, team achievements, and company achievements. And they get to choose to cash out their points for whatever matters most to them across those 6 categories as they accumulate, their points, or they can keep their points in the bank and move them forward and earn, work toward bigger and better rewards on the upper end of the of each tier structure. So that's what the program's about. And in terms of how it came about, we had experimented a lot through the years and done a ton of stuff, Adam, with perks, and we ran a ton of competitions. We sent our top performers to, crazy places all over the world. And, we've always done a lot of things that gave back to our employees via rewards and competition programs. And after about 7 or 8 years of doing it, we thought, wouldn't it be a cool idea to, instead of to create rewards and just kind of tell employees, this is what you're getting, kind of reverse engineer that and let the employees come to us and tell us, this is what I want. And that was the impetus behind Pace Points, was to model a choose your own perks structure where the employee gets the opportunity to cash out for whatever they want across any category that they're most motivated by.
Is this internally administered, or does a third party manage this for the company?
It's all internally administered, which from my standpoint is the blessing. And if you ask our HR and our recruiting team, it's probably the curse.
I'm sure. So talk about what does it take to run this program, and how do you eliminate, or do you eliminate, subjective measurements of success? I mean, this seems to me that you've got to be pretty dialed operationally speaking to have this not be a popularity contest internally. How do you make this real and fair?
That's a great question, Adam. So we ran about a year and a half worth of checks and balances and testing on this before it was rolled out to the staff. And we did all kinds of stuff in that year and a half testing phase. We did financial testing. We consulted with tax experts. We had to get the thing patented and, trademarked and, marketed properly. The first thing we really looked at, to your point, was, how do we make the point structure and the reward structure as equitable as possible and as fair and balanced as possible for the employees. So there's 4 different ways that N6Aers, our employees, can earn points. 1 is through individual achievements, 2 is through team achievements, 3 is through company-wide achievements, and then 4 is discretionary points that managers can hand to their subordinates just on a subjective discretionary basis as they're doing a good job. Numbers 1, 2, and 3, individual, team, and company, are much more objective. They're much more based on very specific achievements that are tied to the individual, team, or company performance. There's not a whole lot of gray area within those 3 categories. The 4th category is where the subjective nature of it comes in. And look, there should always be some level of discretion with these reward structures. You don't want to make it too science-based. You always need to have retain some level of art to it. And if Adam, if you're doing a really good job as an employee, maybe you did a great job for a client, maybe you went above and beyond the call of duty to do something phenomenally well. Maybe you showed sacrifice that no one else did. Even though those achievements may not necessarily fall into category 1, 2, or 3, as your supervisor, I still wanted to have the ability to give you a pat on the back with some kind of subjective Pace Points reward, and that's where that plays into the mix. But it's all done through checks and balances. We don't like the objective nature of it to be overly weighted. We don't like the subjective nature to be overly weighted. So we're always kind of calibrating the structure so that it never tips too heavily in the balance of objective over subjective.
I can imagine the principal aim of this program is retention of your best people. Help listeners with some perspective on time scale here. In order to reach the top tier of this program from a reward standpoint, what amount of time is intended to have passed for that to be possible?
So a lot of that comes down to where the employee fits into the org chart. A lot of it comes down to some of the team and individual competitions we have in place. Like, here's a good example: the $50,000 tier, which can be cashed out for a $50,000 check, if you just want to take the cash. Or I'll just give you an example of some non-cash equivalents at that tier. If you're getting married, we'll pay for a first-class honeymoon for you, first-class travel for 2 5-star hotels, the whole bit. Other stuff in that tier, if you like to travel, we'll actually give you the opportunity to choose any city in the United States, and we'll get you set up to work from that city for 6 months. We'll get you an office. We'll get you an apartment. We'll let you work remotely from that city for 6 months. If you're into health and wellness, we'll pay for every one of your meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for an entire year. So that's what's on that $50,000 tier. And we know right off the bat, one of our directors, right off the bat, just for winning one of our competitions, will earn enough points just on that one competition to reach that tier. So obviously, if you're the director, and I think we have 5 or 6 directors, if you're a director and you win the top performing director competition, you automatically get elevated to that tier before factoring in any other points that you're going to gain throughout the course of the year. So, a lot of it's dependent on where they fit into the org chart. Our SVPs on our senior management team is much more incentivized by the performance of the company, things like revenue and margin performance. If we hit certain revenue triggers, they can pretty much expect to get elevated to that tier 1, before the 12-month mark passes. So a lot of it just comes down to where they fit into the org chart and, the achievement of the lane that they're most aligned with according to the program.
You mentioned a patent. Is it your intention to commercialize this program?
Yeah, we've already gotten it trademarked. So we have pacepoints.com. We have the PacePoints name trademarked, and the actual program itself and the point structure and the way we modeled it, we're in the process of getting that patent. We have a patent pending right now. And, we've had a lot of clients actually come to us and ask us to model something like this for their own companies. And, down the road, obviously we want to make sure it's ironclad and, it's rock solid for our internal employees first. But once that's in place, down the road, we'll think about externalizing this for clients' benefits as well.
You mentioned client interest. Let's talk about what clients are asking for from a PR standpoint. Do you see a lift in the number of your prospective customers or current customers asking you about employment branding or career site type work?
Yeah, it's funny because when we first got started at them back in 2009, I can tell you that the core focus of almost every one of our engagements revolved around clients coming to us and asking for us to get them out there, vis-a-vis the media or, on social media platforms or, on awards or speaking circuits with the sole intent of creating leads or generating demand in their product. So that's kind of what life looked like on the client side for us for our first few years of existence. I can tell you now, there's equally, now it's almost a decade later, there's equally as much interest we're getting from clients or prospective clients who are looking to hire us to get them out there in the media so that they can recruit talent at a high level than they can to sell their products at a high level. So it's interesting how that, has kind of shifted. Back in the day, it was literally PR only for the sake of demand gen or lead gen. Now it's PR for the sake of demand gen and lead gen, but also recruiting and, talent acquisition purposes for sure.
Yeah, this week during NFL games, I was pleasantly surprised to find CarMax on the air with an employment branding ad, basically saying, it shows a picture of a mid-career female pushing a beached whale into the ocean, or mid-career man changing a tire for someone in the rain, and basically saying, if you're the kind of person that likes to help, then you should work at CarMax. And of course, what they're saying is, if you like to work with people like this, then you should do business with us. And I find these concepts inextricably linked, even more so where we sit today in the market, where customer experience is tied to your people, and your people come from having a really well-defined brand and process. So I can see how customers are starting to integrate that, which, I think, it opens up a whole new lane for the PR industry in general that perhaps didn't exist, as you said, 8 or 9 years ago.
I totally agree with that. In fact, I can tell you too, Adam, I think you nailed it. And also from our experience, even though this was certainly not the intent, when we sit down with prospective clients, sometimes they hire us because we have such a, awesome internal culture. Like, they see the way employees are treated here. They see a lot of our cultural programs. They see the way we run our culture as a major differentiator. And sometimes they hire us just for that because they realize that, if you've built a system where internally employees are taken care of, they're super motivated, they're really rewarded, things are clicking, there's incredible chemistry. If they're smart enough to realize that, usually by extension, that will trickle itself, that will trickle on to the client, and the client will benefit from that because there's always alignment in a service business between, look, if employees are motivated, chances are, they're doing a good job for clients, and it's all about alignment between the client and the service team, right? So a lot of times, even though it wasn't the intent, prospective clients will look at our culture and they'll be like, well, look, if these guys have such a great internal culture, chances are, this is a company we want to do business with.
What, based on your experience growing N6A, would you say is the overarching philosophy that's driven you to do things like pace points or compete and care, embrace the pace? Is there an approach or mindset that you're bringing to this that you would say summarizes how you think companies should build and develop their teams?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a few. I mean, number one is experimentation. I think it's really rooted in, a lot of your listeners I know are entrepreneurs and founders, and they should always have, entrepreneurs generally have a very curious, experimental mindset, right? And a lot of our culture and rewards were rooted in just running experiments. And sometimes experiments, by the way, didn't work out. Out of all of, I don't know, out of the 20 things that have really worked well and have become part of the fabric of our culture, there were probably hundreds of things that we tried and tested that didn't work out. And we were smart enough to cut our losses and kind of throw those ones out the window. So I think a lot of it is rooted in experimentation. A lot of it is also rooted in differentiation. In our world, in the agency, PR, marketing services, agency environment, agencies are, pegged historically for having really bad cultures and, always thinking about the client only and not about the employee. So, we saw a way to sort of reverse engineer that as a major opportunity to differentiate ourselves, to really, look at the employee first and say, let's create an employee first culture. And then by extension, that will benefit the client. Where a lot of times I think agencies will say, look, let's look at the client first. And then by extension, the employee should be, proud or happy to work here. We kind of did that in the opposite way. So I don't know, the two things that come to mind in our case would be experimentation and differentiation.
What do you think is the biggest opportunity you have to improve or extend the success you've had with the people side of your agency?
As far as scaling that externally?
No, I mean, as you look back on your experience of building this team and looking to the future of the business and where you want to take it, is there one thing you need to get better at, or one thing that if executed in a way that it can be, that would propel your business forward? Coming from the culture or people side.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a relentless commitment to continuing to listen and learn. Every day you can get better, and every day you can learn, and usually that learning comes by listening. And you see, if you come to N6A, whether you come to our New York office or Toronto, or in Boulder if the team happens to be out there, you're going to see a lot of engagement and a lot of collaboration. I mean, you'll see myself and the senior management team taking new employees and junior staff out to coffees and out to lunch and just listening to them. And just through listening, you'll learn a lot. Pace points, frankly, came about because a lot of our employees were really happy to work here and they liked the culture we had built, but they thought that we could do a better job of customizing our rewards according to what they were motivated by. And through 3 or 4 of those conversations, you find out that those things become a trend, and then you sit down and you kind of build a program around that. And all those things just start and end with listening. And you're not going to find anybody, myself included, who is just going to sit back in our chair and say, let's relax. We built a great company. We don't want to get better. We're on a, we're relentless and very, very committed to just getting better each and every day by listening to the employees.
I want to end by talking about a pretty exciting new business vertical for you guys, and that's recreational cannabis. We were talking before we started recording that what brought you to Boulder was an early bet that the cannabis industry would be a pretty big growth industry for you. That's turned out, of course, to be the case. It is now the topic of conversation in the business world. You guys are way ahead of it. To extend the discussion of employment branding and recruitment marketing, what was it like trying to advertise jobs to work for cannabis clients 3 years ago when the future was pretty uncertain?
Sure.
About the industry? It's certainly not the case now, but back then, this is certainly a pioneering endeavor. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, recruiting for our cannabis group in 2018 versus recruiting for our cannabis group when it first, when it was in its infancy back, in 2015 or 2016. It's like day and night, as you can imagine. I think today we probably get, I don't know, somewhere between 4 and 5 times the amount of inbound interest in our cannabis group, working for our cannabis group, than any of our other service groups. And it certainly wasn't the case back in the day. So when I think back to cannabis in the early days, there were 2 things that I think we benefited from, Adam. Number one was that we promoted from within, and we had tested out a few cannabis client campaigns and client accounts before we really planted our flag in the ground and said we were open for business in cannabis. So we were able, again, experimenting, we were able to run a few experiments before we sort of formalized the group and the offering. And we were able to do that because we had a few people internally, one in particular, Rob Vanisco, who today actually now runs our entire cannabis group, who were interested in it and were curious about it and knew that if it didn't work out, they could always fall back on their day job at N6A, which was servicing accounts in other, non-cannabis sectors. So we did benefit from the fact that we were able to sort of, breed from within, right? Groom from within. And we had that team, or at least that resource, in place to begin with. And then the second thing was when, so that kind of helped us get off the ground. Then when it became, all right, now we're off the ground, we have to go outside and recruit from the outside market. It was challenging. The thing that really got us through it was that we were very honest. I think we were very transparent that any potential recruit who was going to be joining our cannabis group needed to know that they were joining a group that, obviously was exciting. It was fast paced. Every day was different. You could be a part of something that, could have a transformational impact, not just on, on the industry, but really on the economy and on the jobs market, on a global level. But it also came with risk. And we didn't know where the market was going to go. We didn't know, where the legislative decisions were going to land at the time. So a lot of our recruiting efforts really were rooted in excitement, but also transparency and honesty, so that by the time anybody sent their resume to us or certainly came in for a job interview, they kind of knew that, they knew the reward that was potentially at the table, but they also knew the risk. And it just created a very pure and honest relationship between, us and the employee by the time they started with N6A. And we've made a lot of mistakes through the years, but I think that's one thing we got right, is the way we recruited for cannabis from day one on the external market has always been rooted in transparency and honesty.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the final word. You've been learning from Matt Rosetta, founder and CEO at North 6 Agency. Matt, thank you for being with us
Adam,
today.
It was a pleasure. Great to be here.
And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, for this week's episode of the Best Team Wins podcast, where we're featuring entrepreneurs whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, author of the book, The Best Team Wins, which you can find online at www.thebestteamwins.com. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you here next week.
Thanks for listening to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. You can find out more information about Adam and his book, The Best Team Wins, Building Your Business Through Predictive Hiring, at thebestteamwins.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.